Hello, good afternoon, good morning in the Netherlands. I hope that everybody can hear me. Welcome to this session in Winner, the Week of Indonesia Netherlands Education and Research. My name is Pieter van Tuyl. I am the director for Nuffic NASO Indonesia, based here in Jakarta. And I have the pleasure of being your moderator today. Happy to see all of you. We will focus in this session of Winner on the important issue how to approach digitalization in light of academic freedom. The technological developments of the past decades have sometimes been overwhelming. I belong to the generation who wrote his MA thesis on a typewriter, for those of you who still remember what that is. And if I look today at students, they produce their thesis virtually using a myriad of technologies to access data, to mine data, while working with other students and teachers all over the world. So in the knowledge sphere, digitalization and new technologies create many new opportunities to improve research, to improve knowledge generation, to improve education also. Working here in Indonesia, which I guess you all know, is a vast country of 17,000 islands spanning 3 different time zones. It has been fascinating to see over the past couple of years how, to some extent, of course, pushed by the pandemic, online learning has helped to reach out to remote areas of the country. So for Indonesia, from this perspective, digitalization has meant real progress of creating opportunities to make education more inclusive. Yet, digitalization also brings considerable risks and potential constraints. All of us have to learn about cybersecurity in our individual lives. If we open our computer and we open our email, we have to be careful with things like phishing email or with online bullying, something particularly important for young people. And at an institutional level, universities equally have to be careful with the safety and security of information and learning systems. So digitalization can help us to improve research and knowledge generation, and at the same time, it makes it easier to produce false information, fake news. So it seems that digitalization brings us good and bad things in one package. How do we deal with that in the knowledge sector, which is based on the idea that there is a form of truth that can be explored by research, that can be transferred, that can be learned by other people, and that such process of education makes humanity better off? The response of government has been to create new laws and regulations. In Europe, the most important framework in this regard has become known as GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Indonesia also recently has accepted a data protection law, which bears quite some similarities with the GDPR. But what happens to academic freedom if the management of data and processing of information is increasingly subject of laws and regulations? Can we still think freely and do research and learn together and get the best out of ourselves and each other in the knowledge sector if we increasingly run into the brick walls of security and management information systems? Technical rather than academic control and regulators. Where to strike the balance in the digital transformation of knowledge and education between principles, policy, and technology? How do we deal with the politicization of information that we also see? I'm aware that we're posing big questions with many different aspects, and I'm therefore very happy that we have an excellent panel today of three experts to discuss this question. I have to apologize for the absence of Professor Cosimo Monda, the director of the Maastricht European Center on Privacy and Cybersecurity. His son has an emergency operation today, and so he is unfortunately not able to join us. It leaves us with three speakers. First, we have Professor Dr. Paulina Pannen. Welcome, Paulina. She is the chairman of the Indonesian Cyber Education Institute, Universitas Terbuka, the Open University. She has a long-standing career in Indonesian academia and has also worked as a policy advisor to the Indonesian Ministry of Research and Technology when there still was such a ministry. Second, a welcome also to Dr. Herlambang Wiratraman, senior lecturer, constitutional law in the Faculty of Law of Universitas Gadjah Mada. Herlambang obtained his PhD from Leiden University in 2014, and he wrote on press freedom, law, and politics. Always happy, of course, to see a Netherlands alumni here in Winner. Third, I'm also very happy to welcome Professor Dr. Annelien Bredenoord, Rector Magnificus of the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Welcome. Before joining the Erasmus University, Professor Bredenoord headed the Department of Medical Humanities at UMC in Utrecht, and her research has focused on ethical and social questions surrounding new and often controversial technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data, and biobanks. Professor Bredenoord is not only a professor, but she is also a member of the Dutch Senate. So I think it's good to have a politician also in our discussion today, because we will talk about the crossover from principles to policy and technology. So welcome to our panel. The setup today is pretty straightforward. I will first give the floor to each of our panelists for about 12 to 15 minutes. Afterwards, of course, the panelists can react on each other, and we will open the floor for further questions and answers with the audience. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. So let's move to Professor Dr. Paulina Pannen. Her introduction will focus in particular on digital literacy in education and learning. Professor Pannen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Peter. Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to colleagues from Netherlands. I will be focusing my talk today about the cybersecurity from the perspective of education. So as we are entering the digital transformation era, especially pushed by the pandemic, we are focusing on the situation where everything is just becoming digital. And then if we are not aware of what is the implication of being digital, it can be a dangerous things for us, especially for children and also for students. And it happens to be that a lot of things happening because of unawareness of the security of our data, of our interaction in the cyber world. So my approach is that in education, we took two ways. The first one is that we believe cyber security is actually part of our daily life, of everything that we do in our daily life. We have to assess the risk of information, any information at all that comes to our place, to our hands. And then we have to protect the business. Business in this case, in a large sense, means that everything in our daily life is a business of itself. Our going somewhere, our traveling, our work, and our research, our education, etc. And then if we know the risk and we could protect our action, then we can operate with confidence. That's what we expect. So the first principle in our view is that cybersecurity is part of our daily life. So everybody must be aware of that. Well, on the other side is that cybersecurity is a part of the computer science. So it's part of the science that can be taught, that can be learned, and can be studied. It refers to the practice of protecting the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of information. So that is part that education can also take part. It means that you can develop perhaps a study program later on about the cybersecurity. Right now in Indonesia, for example, we don't have the cybersecurity as study program yet. Cybersecurity is handled under the computer science and information technology study program usually. Next, please. Based on the perspective that cybersecurity is part of everything we do, and the first point is that how we assess the risk, that is what we call evaluating information. So we have to assess all the information that comes to our hands with the principles, with the assumption that no information is actually entirely neutral. So information has some value and is value loaded usually. To use it effectively, one needs to know the context of in which it was produced usually, and who is the author usually, and then some other contextual indicator that needs to be studied first, to be learned first, so that we can understand what's the meaning of that information. And not in all information is equally reliable. One needs to choose the most authoritative sources. If you are getting the same titles or the same information, for example, but if you notice a very detail, a small detail is very different, then you need to figure out which one is which, is the most reliable one. And then the other thing is that how we respond to that information that we receive is also a kind of indicator whether or not we can assess that information, or how we assess that information. One's own attitudes, belief, experience will affect how one receive it. This is actually what we call right now with the information literacy. And it is an important aspect of critical thinking, actually, that needs to be studied, to be learned by everybody, including students in schooling level as well as higher education. Next, please. According to one survey that about 64 or two-thirds people do not evaluate information, do not do exploration or fact checking if they receive information. 10% of internet users, for example, do not consider truth or factual information when they find online. So they just read it and they swallow it, and they perhaps later on it can also be a matter of what you call a trigger of that action. And then 29% of internet users don't make any checks at all of the factual information they find online. So, once again, this is just taking everything as it is. The 26% of social media users say they would not tend to check. So only about 40% or 30 something percent that actually the user of information actually check whether the information is correct, is reliable, and it is acceptable or not. So evaluation of information needs to be actually everyday our everyday action, our everyday habit, in order for us to, quote unquote, I will say, survive in this digital transformation. Next, please. We can look when we have information, we can look by the very basic standard, the 5WH questions, and then its accuracy, its relevance, up-to-dateness, references, and publisher. But why we are doing that? First of all, we are making sense of the information. So once again, not all information are reliable. Not all information is value free, so we need to make sense of our information that we receive in order for us to use it for the purpose of either academic or our daily life. Next, please. There are other indicators. Next, please. Yes, okay. There are other indicators which are more comprehensive, like authority, audience, purpose, quality, content, currency, accuracy, suitability, that can be used if we would like to evaluate the information. However, once again, the purpose of evaluating information is to make sense of information. So you can use many indicators at all. The most comprehensive one, the medium one, or the latest one will be very simple one, but please use it with the knowledge that you are making sense of that information for your own purpose. Next, please. This is the very simple one, only three indicators saying that you need to look at the content, whether the content is correct or not. You need to look at the context where the information is actually being produced. And you need also to look at the creator. Usually, the creator can also be in what you call, I would call the kind of journalist that is not reliable or something like that. There are a lot of what do you call, not black, not gray literature, gray writing or something like that. But that is the who is belonging to that, then we have to be aware of it. So that is about the information literacy. Uh, right now, in the digital transformation, especially when we are having all the gadgets in our hands, we are also dealing not only with the content, that is the insight or the message that we receive, the information that we receive, but also with the digital well-being. Next, please. In the common term, digital well-being is known as digital literacy. For many of the schooling level students or the teachers, and also some of the students in higher education, they know it as media literacy. Next, please. Well, the digital well-being is actually, the principle is finding balance with technology. First of all, technology should improve life, not distract from it. So we need to use the technology. Remember, technology is uh, a tool that we can use to improve life, not distracting from it or not destroying our life. And in education setting, technology should improve learning, not distracting learning not distracting student from learning. So it is a tool that teachers and lecturers can use to improve learning, students can use to improve learning, and later on to do research, to do some innovation, and to embark in academic activities. uh, the essence of this digital well-being is how an individual can be happy or be rewarded with within his her digital activities or experience or journey. So if you cannot be feeling rewarded, if you cannot make use, take advantage of the technology, it means that the technology is destroying you. It means that the technology is distracting you from it. So that's not supposed to be happening. Next, please. We can see these are the examples that I did. A little research, for example, if you go into your what we call handphone or mobile phone, you can find digital well-being features there. Okay, and then if you take a look at that digital well-being features, you can find how many hours you have used, for example, for doing YouTubes, for Googling, for doing WhatsApping, or other activities like, for example, taking pictures or doing an Instagram, etc. So if you want to know, that is taking place in your mobile phone, and you can take a look at it. The thing is that it is done after the journey is taking place. So if you have students doing it, and you said that, why are you what you call spending your times in Instagram instead of doing Googling for your research, for example. So this is just an indicator that is coming after the experience is taking place. You can make use of it, so you know that next time perhaps you can warn the students saying that, okay, now you can focus more on the Googling for your research, look for literature, etc. But apparently not all the gadgets has that features. I got one participants, for example, doesn't have that features in his handphone. So we have to be looking very carefully. This is one way of assessing the risk, in our case, assessing the risk that our gadget is actually not what we call not enough, not adequate enough for us to do the cybersecurity on our own. We have some examples again. Next, please. I will not focus on the first two, but I will focus on the third one with the picture here taken in February 2014, claiming that recent freezing weather in Venice, Italy, created this scene of a frozen canal. Actually, you have to be careful with this kind of picture, which is it's a kind of superimposed. Actually, it's a fake picture. It is a composite created by someone. Okay, he took a picture of the flood. Not the flood, is actually a lake, and then superimpose it with the Venice's building over here, so that it seems like Venice is being flooded, but that's not true. So we have to be careful with this kind of thing. Well, next, please. The issues. Okay, in Indonesia right now we have 300,000 lecturers, we have 9 million students, we have 4,500 higher education institutions, and 40,000 study programs. And we have to deal with, first of all, the issues of uh, that we face is plagiarism, fake news or fake data, bullying, and fraud, and then cybercrime. Cybercrime means not only our students and lecturer become the victim of the crime, but they are also, some of them are the player of the crime. So we have to be careful with this, and it has been indicated by the ComInfo that it has what we call making the country to be disadvantaged at the economic value of about 4 billion 500 4.5 billion US dollars per year because of this. Yeah, We deal with false connection, misleading content, false content, imposter content, manipulated content, fabricated content, and everything. So what shall we do? We know that cybersecurity is not yet very popular in terms of everybody knows it. It is a popular term right now, but not really what is it, how to do it, etc. It is very small people, usually only the computer science people who knows it. And we know that taking the perspective that cybersecurity is in our everyday life, what can we do? Next, please. This is just a kind of playing with the ideas. Perhaps we can provide educational information for public. It can be modules, micro credential for transfer if it is for students, higher education, for example. Short videos, usually we call it public service videos, and then flyers, of course, and also games for the students. They like games right now. Even teaching and learning now is much more done by gamification. So these are some of the ideas that we can do together. Collaboration between the Indonesian researcher and Indonesian developer, and also the Netherlands community there, higher education institution who can help us work together. Uh, is really a very challenging issues, but I think we can do it. Who are the audience for this educational information? Everybody, actually. We can focus on the lecturers, on the university students, teachers, school students, parents, and everybody. So that we know that cybersecurity is very important. The term is floating around everybody, but how to do it, how to manage it, and how to deal with it is very, very limited right now. The information is very limited. And to those who are keen of developing study program, perhaps a kind of interdisciplinary study programs, for somebody who can be advocator later on these cybersecurity issues, especially in education, that will be very, very much important. That is about all, I think, on my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Paulina Pannen, for an interesting overview of the landscape, let's say, with, of course, the key issue to adjust. Critical thinking is not new, but we have to learn it in new ways. And you provided a framework with a number of tools that we can use in education. Also, I'm sure that Professor van Bredenoord was interested to hear that there is 4,500 universities in Indonesia and 9.5 million students. The proportion, of course, of the sector here is something that also for me as a Dutch person, it's hard to get used to. We go quickly over to Herlambang Witraman, who will zoom in particular on some of the more legal aspects and how protection of personal data works out in Indonesia in light of individual and institutional freedom and rights, and with some suggestions. Herlambang, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pak Peter, for introducing me and also explaining about my works. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for this opportunity to share what I've done in collaboration with many groups of civil society and also academics in Indonesia and also international network. Discussing about academic freedom, science, and digital transformations. I would like to start by looking at the case, because so many cases actually in Indonesia in relation to digital rights, attacking digital rights, and it becomes uneasy situations for lecturers, researchers, students, even for those who are really criticizing about the science policy, and it becomes what is that sort of like dangerous trend in current situations. I just want to give an example. It was in 2020, just a group of students as part of constitutional law department. They call it as constitutional law society. Hosted a discussions in relation to impeachment under in constitutional law, and it was cancelled due to attacks in the form of intimidations and death threats, because organizers also got terrors. Threats began to arrive in the midnight at the names listed on the activity posters, namely speakers, because speakers also was targeted, and what is that sort of although she is a prominent professor on constitutional law and really recognized in explaining about constitutional law studies, but she was also targeted digitally. And then moderators also and discussions points. The target of the threats spread to the family members concerned in the form of sending text messages to the parents. So can you imagine just regular discussions at Gajah Mada? It was in 2020, and because of the topic, perhaps it is considered sensitive, but it's common in the constitutional law studies. But what happened after that? Then so many attacks, although those students and also speakers reported to the police, but there's no accountability from those who are actually responsible for those attacks. It represents actually one important case for an understanding about the context of repressions or suppressions, especially discussing about science, or discussing about discussing or debating about academic things. Yeah. The next slides. Always when we call this as a academic freedom issues, of course it was sort of like it has been debating each other. Yeah, this is not part of academic freedom, because this is what is that sort of like a group of students just creating problems without considering what is the ethics at the university and so on. But I would like to refer one particular important legal framework that I could refer to these presentations. What is academic freedom actually? What is the standard and its interpretations? Based on a committee on economic, social, and cultural rights, especially through its general comment in interpreting number 13, especially Article 13, the right to educations. If you look at paragraph 38, 39, and 40, 38 means not merely about academics or lecturers, but also students, covering students as well. And under paragraph 39, it mentions that members of the academic community individually or collectively are free to pursue, develop, and transmit knowledge and ideas through research, teaching, study, discussion, documentation, production, creations, or writing. And academic freedom includes the liberty of individuals to express freely opinions about the institutions or system in which they work, to fulfill their functions without discrimination or fear of repression by the state or any other actor, to participate in professional or representative academic bodies, and to enjoy all the internationally recognized human rights applicable to individuals in the same jurisdiction. And the other important point, if we discussing about academic freedom, is about academic freedom requires the autonomy of institution. So this not merely actually about higher education, but also research institutes covering those who are producing knowledge or science. And what is happening in the region, and particularly in Indonesia? There are several reports, scholarly works discussing about the political context in looking at the political system and its influence to the digital rights protections. And looking at specifically on academic freedom, index, especially measuring the level of academic freedom in countries around the world, confirms that after reforms following the end of Suharto regime in 1998, protection for academic freedom has declined from time to time, and especially during last 5 years. It's really a lot of cases targeting university lecturers, students, researchers, independent researchers, and also foreign scholars. So that's actually influence to the climate of reproducing knowledge in this country. What will be the root or the causes of such particular situations or problems, especially dealing with Indonesia? This is of course not new, but more what I call systematic and or legal. Based on our research findings or discussing with many other groups in the especially under KICA, Indonesian Caucus for Academic Freedom, there are several issues. The first one is really no or limited university autonomy, and it relates to, I think, the next slide. It relates to the state or ministers' political interventions to appoint rectors, administrative measures, and it's connect to the bureaucratizations or centralizations in making serious issues, fundamental issues in intervening the university. And second, this is related to feudalism legacies. Actually, during the New Order authoritarian regime, they also shaped the university into the social structure, feudal social structures. And then now what we are looking at the situations at the campuses in Indonesia, feudalism legacies still take place. The third one is no or limited legal framework to protect academic freedom, or even less academic freedom traditions. The fourth, controlling research, publications, and its institutions. You can go to the next slide. And the fifth, actually, this is related to suppressive policies, to silence criticisms, including in that context is related to the state's cooptations and or hegemony in disciplining academics and researchers. What will be reasons to these situations? Perhaps you can refer to several other scholars' works in relation to declining democracy or authoritarian turns. There are many scholars already mentioned about this, and in general, that will be closely connected to the oligarch power relations. And the last one, the sixth, then this is closely related to our topics, targeting criticism, research findings, and academic discussions, and all I can put as digital attacks. For instance, a scholar just post what is the research findings in relation to deal with the COVID pandemic and how to manage or how to give input for policymaker. Then it suddenly get attacks through his or her social medias, and of course it is difficult to get responsibility or accountability to understand who actually involved in that regards. And it's a very current situations in looking at the case of Eric Meyers. Now he's still debating in this country, in Indonesia, because of the decree of the letter from the Minister of Forest and what is that, environment. And when I got interview, what will be the problem on this issue, whether this is serious or whether this is a new for Indonesian, and I said that this is for several times before. Actually, this is not the first time, and not surprisingly, because actually the trend already informed us the problem of academic freedom, especially for scientist freedom. It becomes getting difficult because, for instance, like different datas. Why do we need to stop the researchers? Why not, for instance, like making sitting together, discussing, making consensus brief in order to exchange ideas and also exchange data, perhaps, in order to support or protect, for instance, like how to deal with the climate change or protected areas or protected animals. So that's would be more productive or more progressive in bringing the message of protecting scientist freedom. And however, in our academic circles, we are fully aware there is a limited legal framework to protect us as academics or scientists. Therefore, in 2017, it was really like collaborative works among scientists, researchers, lecturers, students, and those who are targeted for suppressions. They came to Surabaya and built Surabaya principles on academic freedom. We call it a strategy in order to defend ourselves. What is the value or fundamental freedom that should have that should be what is that, sort of like protecting academia. And then interestingly, after a year after Surabaya Principles on Academic Freedom adopted by groups of academic groups of human rights lecturers in Indonesia, then it was adopted also among Southeast Asian universities network under SIHN, Southeast Asian Human Rights Studies Network. And another development is the National Human Rights Institution, or Komnas HAM, already adopted formally norms and procedures standard for freedom of expression and opinion. It was May 2021, and it became a guidance in order to promote academic freedom as part of freedom of opinion and academic and freedom of expressions. However, of course, the challenge, teaching in the context of digital transformations, because the challenge is digital authoritarianism. I'm not going to tell detail on this, but several recommendations made by KIKA in collaborations, Indonesian Caucus for Academic Freedom, in collaboration with scholars at risk, through a formal mechanism under United Nations UPR, Universal Periodical Review. And we have several recommendations in order to push or to propose to the state to call on Indonesia, especially publicly commit to protecting and promoting academic freedom, refrain from the use of force or legal actions intended to restrict or punish scholars, investigate violations of scholars and students' academic freedom, and the fourth, establish an ombudsperson tasked with receiving and responding to academic freedom concerns. And the fifth, this is related to our topic, revise the electronic information and transaction law and science law to conform to national and international legal standards and obligations relating to academic freedom and freedom of expressions. And the sixth, strengthen university autonomy and reduce the risk of corruptions in the state higher education institutions. And I'm happy this morning I read what is that, Anti-Graft Commission would like to expand to other universities to check the corruptions because of capital accumulations without accountability. And the last slide, it's related to what will be the challenge in science in digital transformations. Of course, first, the state must end digital attacks and pursue justice to end systematic impunity. Many cases happen, but no responsibility. Second, cyber defamation law under electronic information and transaction law must be revised, clearly, usually targeting academics, researchers, and even students. And this is what is that? From time to time, we are facing the situation, although the government already initiate the formal interpretation, but it will be different at ground. The third one, Indonesia has officially enacted its first ever personal data protection law, just signed by the president yesterday under law number 27 of 2022. Our concern is about public interest because in this context it would limit especially those who are critical to the government policies. For instance, it will be limiting possible limitations for what can be considered as dangerous research, because the science law states that without clearance from authorities, scientists can face penalties for conducting dangerous research. And it also, flexible interpretation would possible limit the research. And the last one, of course, we need solidarity support for promoting and strengthening academic freedom in Indonesia, because this is really fundamental for protecting scientist freedom, building commitment in collaborations agreement. And I'm very happy before presenting this, Nufik already mentioned about these issues already in their website. I think that's all. My presentation will be open for discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herr Lambang, for a very different presentation. You reminded us how principles are, of course, vested in international human rights law, but there is the law and the practice of law, and that is not always positive in Indonesia. For those of you who are not so familiar with it, the case Herr Lambang was referring to, Erik Meijaard is a Dutch researcher based in Brunei who recently published data on the protection of orang-utang that were different data than the Ministry of Forestry and Environment is using, and as a result of that, the ministry wrote a letter basically declining further collaboration with him. So that's just for those of you who are not so familiar with the case. And then interestingly, also a tool, the Surabaya Principles on Academic Freedoms, formulated by a circle of friends and networks in the academic sectors and civil society activists, trying to give a more positively formulated framework that we can uphold these freedoms. Having said that, I move over to Professor Bredenoord. Rich information already. You come in more from the perspective of ethics and socially disruptive technologies, but also with your brain as a politician, how to make sense out of all of this and how to ensure that digitalization is liberating and it doesn't turn into authoritarianism that Herr Lambang is concerned about. Professor Bredenoord, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this invitation, because I think the topic that we're discussing today, the digital transformation in general in society, particularly, of course, in knowledge generation, education, research, it's so topical and actual and relevant that it's difficult, well, to talk shortly about this. But what I will try to do is say a bit about the moral principles and dilemmas that we're facing. I will share some examples from being an executive board member and how we are making decisions and how to move our university forward. In the Netherlands, as the associations of Dutch universities, but particularly our experiences at Erasmus University. And I would also say something about the interaction or the impact on the academic freedom, as Professor Wiratraman also did. And actually, for the listeners, I was a co-author of the 2021 report of the Dutch Academy of Arts and Sciences, the KNAW, and there we also drafted a report on academic freedom. And we discussed also moral dilemmas in how to deal with academic freedom. I think it's also very topical. So I think some of the moral dilemmas and themes to work on, not only today and yesterday, but I think this is something of the coming years, is, well, let me first stress and emphasize that I see many opportunities in the digital transformation, particularly in the wider access and outreach to students. As never before during COVID, what we're doing now, this session and all the meetings and educations that we're doing internationally, abroad, with unusual students joining our educational programs, I really think that is helpful and that we should promote and stimulate this, the internationalization that it offers. But then, as already mentioned, there are some serious challenges and risks for privacy and for ownership, and dilemmas of working from public institutes with private tech companies. There are many of the legal issues that needs to be involved. In the European Union, we have the GDPR as our legal framework, but obviously we would like to collaborate internationally, not only EU, but also broader. But at least at Erasmus universities, we decided that we only want to work with companies that follow GDPR rules. And then I think some of the points of attention is that we invest, that it are many costs involved for universities that are publicly funded, but the profits of all of this go to private markets. And also there, that needs attention, it needs a balance. I think there are, many of you will recognize of the dilemmas and issues that are sketched also by Professor Panne and Professor Wiratraman, but I'm optimistic that there are ways to work with those dilemmas and design long-distance opportunities worldwide that enable us to reach out to our students all over the world, although there are constraints and boundaries. In 2021, in the Netherlands, all universities declared that in choosing digital learning systems, including online proctoring systems, and when we apply those systems in education, we share certain public values. And we only choose to work and collaborate with universities, institutes, and companies that share those values. And those include justice, including transparency and equal access. It includes respect for humanity, involving that we are respectful and consider the interest and well-being of people, both the constructors of the appliances, the platforms, as well as the consumers of those platforms, and autonomy, meaning independence, and that we own our own data and our students' data. And we are actually in the process, within also the universities of the Netherlands, of giving content to those principles within the boundaries of the universities. But this is obviously a learning process. Well, during COVID, we all reaped the benefits of Zoom and Dropbox and testing and learning appliances that became readily available to convert to a fully online and operational learning environment. And actually, we and many managed, well, to actually run our university business completely online. And I think that's really something to mark. Lessons learned were that it was quite easy to reach out to students all over the world in video lectures. We used Miro boards, and we all had all kind of innovative solutions. And we even made use of software to allow students to take their exams by means of online proctoring, in which they used 2 cameras in their private home. Obviously, also this generated many moral discussions with our university council, but we succeeded in finding a way of doing this. But in the end, is this the way that we would like to learn and teach our new generation? No, it isn't. Because in learning, in the end, and we are also at Erasmus University now recalibrating our educational vision, because in the end, there are many things that we can learn and teach online, like particularly knowledge transfer. But the other components of academic education, becoming a person, becoming a leader, personal leadership, socialization, being confronted with people with completely different worldviews, that is something that we need to do together, physically, in a classroom. And so I think it's now very important that universities and learning institutes think about, so what should be online and what should be physically in a classroom meeting together. And it's also important to emphasize that in online learning, a lot of vulnerable data are being exchanged. Personal data of students, all kinds of data and images of organizations. So in our educational programs at Erasmus University, we increasingly believe in virtual student mobility in exchange program within Europe, and in projects that students take up with businesses and governments working on the big societal challenges that we face: energy, economic and demographic transitions. But that requires that besides sharing information in video meetings, that we have learning processes that go much deeper into our organization and information exchange. It means that outside parties need access to our learning environments. And it also means that there needs to be a learning environment in which students submit their personal data, that outside stakeholders enter our university-based systems, and that they also have access to our learning canvases, our repositories, our student portfolios, and that vulnerable information is being exchanged from the perspectives of third parties working with us. So, in order to do so, we decided to move away from a myriad of resources such as Dropbox, email, Zoom, etc., but to connect a learning environment exchange system that enables students to communicate and exchange information with outside parties with a single sign-up point of entry within the online learning environment of our university. Outside parties that enter this environment can enter this environment, but they are blocked from other layers of information and from information with regard to our university, but from our students as well. The Canadian company that we selected that provides this service to us went through a procedure to secure that they would not resell information that students would produce, and that they had to shield the learning information from outside parties, not directly connected to the goals of projects being executed. And we experimented with our faculty of law and our faculty of business and our business school to make this work. And as it turns out, students have easy access, but business and government representatives as well. Another example of the learning process that we are in on the one hand, offering online education and exchange, and on the other hand, having secure the ethical and legal conditions, is that we built an online campus, what we call a Minecraft campus, that we built during COVID. This is actually an exact copy of our campus, as you can see in the picture behind me, where students can meet and greet, they can do scavenger hunts, they can do skills training programs, and within the law faculty, they even built an escape room with legal issues for students to solve in order to ever leave this room. And what we found out is that these learning environments enable us to invite students that study at home and that cannot come to campus because of COVID, but that they were enabled to join in from all university and all European university partners. And a team of students of our business school engaged in a project with students in companies in Africa and South America as well. So actually, well, the experiments were with all the pros and cons, but they were very successful. So these solutions enable us to work in global projects with educational institutes. And I believe that this will empower us to work with a worldwide community, particularly in education. It enables us to prepare students for becoming future professionals that can work with the big challenges and that can introduce them to new insights, different values, other cultures. And in that sense, I know that there are many ethical and legal challenges that needs to be worked on, but I really, also as an ethics professor, I believe in co-production. That technology is not something that is put passively on us, but we can, during the use of technology, we can co-design and co-create in a way of ethics by design. We can decide how to use technology. And I think that's important that students, lecturers, professionals, but also executive board members work here with governments and lawmakers and with drafting the conditions. And in that sense, I think the collaboration between the Netherlands and Indonesia, and indeed what I heard, the 9.5 million students, we thought at Erasmus University, we have 36,000. This is already big for European university, but I think it's overwhelming, the amount of students, and I think it's really worthwhile to explore the possibilities to exchange, to collaborate. And yesterday I was in Dutch Senate. We had the general political considerations. That's once a year. And actually I had, together with some colleagues, a discussion with our Prime Minister about anonymity on social media platforms and about whether the anonymity is a problem in many European countries because it feeds hatred and how we communicate with each other on social media. But on the other hand, we were well aware that in some countries, also non-democratic countries, being anonymous on social media can help to voice your concerns and help you express free speech. So we actually said we need a framework for things like this, digital communication, that are culture and nation specific. And so I really believe that as a community, with all people taking their responsibility, we can innovate and experiment with online learning and online connection. I think, again, and I think what we need to do here is promoting and protecting public values, but also with private tech partners. Many things to say, but I think it's enough for now. So we have a little bit of time for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Breda-Noord, for a very interesting presentation. I appreciate your more optimistic attitude and very interesting concrete examples of how Erasmus University tries to deal with this by, let's say, rather than just focusing on creating new standards and compliance, also think of how to use digitalization as a new methodology to create, let me say, a Minecraft version of your campus. That's very exciting, but also the one-stop entry point, a new platform that you created in the learning environment, which connects, I think, to Professor Pannen's presentation, with kind of a selective transparency. So people can access the system very deep, but at the same time, they're blocked from other levels of information. So that's a new way of dealing with digitalization. Very interesting. I wish we had another hour for discussion, which we don't, but I appreciate, let me give the floor briefly to the other panelists to respond to this and take one question from the chat, which says, you know, the academic freedom comes hand in hand with scientific integrity. There's two sides to that. So there's the Surabaya principles for academic freedom, but What are the principles for scientific integrity that Paulina, I think, to some extent also talked about? Paulina, back to you for a response and some final thoughts. And for me, a main takeaway is that this is definitely something we need to continue discussing within the winner context in terms of the collaboration between our two countries. Paulina, over to you, please.
Thank you, Pak Peter, and thank you, colleagues, Pak Herlambang and Annalyn. You have highlighted a very important issues in this academic freedom. My perception is this: if we are talking about academic freedom, then we contextualize it within the academic community. I believe I have a very optimistic view, Pak Peter and colleagues. I believe that within that community, we can do whatever you call as an academic freedom. We can talk, we can express, we can write, we can do things that we think it is correct based on the scientific perception. However, outside that community, uh, can you imagine that those people outside of the community may not understand what we are talking about, may not really well informed of what we are doing, so that it is our responsibility as academician, I believe, to quote unquote educate them, to make them aware what we are doing is actually not destroying them, what we are doing is actually for the benefit of them. So the thing is that when we go outside of the community, there are other rules that is expected from us to be following, and that rules may not be in line with our academic rules and regulation within the context of academic freedom. So that's one thing. The second thing is that if you take it larger to the 9 million students, Annalyn, you are correct. It's overwhelming, the number, but yes, we have to deal with it. What can we do so that whatever the issues that we talk about within the academic freedom framework and within that academic community can be enlightening for all of them and not providing a reaction which is detrimental to the public. Like, for example, suddenly one student say, oh, he is bad, and everybody's following he is bad, and then suddenly there is anarchy and there's a lot of other chaotic things. Why is it like that? In my opinion, it is because we don't do the work enough to get them understand what is it actually the issues, not the action that is needed to what you call to answer the issues. So that's
Thank
my
you,
my piece of thought.
Paulina.
Thank you.
I'm with the eye on time because we have to round off. We are reminded here. Herlambang, your final word, briefly, please, before we close this panel.
Yeah, I would like to comment on academic integrity. Yeah, yes, academic integrity has been influenced by, of course, not merely individual issue. Sort of like mostly lecturers in Indonesia are underpaid, for instance, but also our concern is about institutional or structural because of bureaucratizations, centralizations, commercialization of university, and then what we call also McDonaldization of university. But looking at the context of feudal society, social legitimacy is needed, and political structure could intervene the university management to get what I call a more transactional honorary doctoral, for instance, or professorship. And then especially to those who have power in parliament or politicians, judges, they would like to get social status and also to get a chance to be as intellectuals in the political feudal structures.
Okay, thank you very much, Herr Lambang. I'm sorry, we have to round off here. Many thanks to Professor Pannen, Dr. Herr Lambang, Vita Traman, and Professor Bredenoord. Much appreciated your contributions, and I do wish to make a promise that we will continue this conversation within the context of Winner, because I do see certainly opportunities for more collaboration on this between the Minecraft version of Erasmus and the McDonald'sation. I just learned a new term of some Indonesian universities to find a proper balance where academic freedom can flourish and our collaboration also can be productive and interesting for many academics. Thank you very much for your contributions. And we close this panel and we'll move on to the next within a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Peter.